Hello. In today's video, I'm going to walk you through the Work from Home report. This report will help you maintain and even improve communication, productivity, and mental health for yourself and your team while working from home.
The cover of the report looks like this, so I hope you will have your report handy. We're going to walk through a sample here, but I hope you'll have yours so that you can look at the specific instructions that are given to you. You may have recently completed a survey in order to have this working from home report, or you may have previously done another assessment with MasterMinds Leadership from which this report was built. Either way, the working from home report is built from DISC language. DISC is a universal language about behavior. So if you recently did this survey and you're not familiar with DISC, we're going to walk through what that means. And if it's been a while since you were in a DISC workshop or had a personal debriefing, again, we're going to walk through that just to refresh your memory about that, but so that you will know where these insights are coming from. The first page of the assessment gives suggestions and tips that are specific to you. So these are not just generic tips about how to work from home, but they are geared specifically to your DISC type, to your responses to that survey. We're all having different challenges as we work from home. Some of us, our tendency is kind of to get in a bubble and get our nose to the grindstone, and we have trouble kind of emerging from that. It's hard to take a break. We don't remember to do that if we don't have coworkers knocking on our door and interrupting. Others of us are very distracted at home. It's hard for us to find a quiet place in a routine, and so we're struggling in those ways. So each of us will have different kinds of strengths and challenges as we work from home, and so these tips are geared specifically to you. It's not just a generic set of ideas. Following that, on the next few pages, you'll see some tips for communicating with others. And one page says high D, low D. The next page says high I, low I. And you may be saying, what is that? I don't know what D, I, S, and C are. Well, those are the DISC letters, and each of those represent a different behavioral style. And so if you're not familiar with that, or you've seen it and you've just forgotten, we're going to walk through that a little bit so that you can understand where the suggestions and tips in this report are coming from. So DISC is an assessment, a language that talks about 4 dimensions of human behavior. These are 4 areas that each of us interact in every day as we go about just daily tasks, whether that's at home, at work. All of us interact in these 4 areas. And those are problems, people, pace, and procedures. We each deal with problems and challenges. We all interact with people. Each of us has a pace, whether that's slow or fast or medium, that we work at. And there are procedures and systems all around us that we have to adhere to, whether it's speed limits or tax laws or just the way things work at work. There are different procedures and guidelines for how things are supposed to get done. And each of us interact with those problems, people, pace, and procedures in different ways. The DISC letters stand for representatively each one of these different areas of behavior. So the D is for dominance, which is the problems and challenges quadrant. I is for influence, how you interact with people and contacts. S is for steadiness, for the pace, and C is for compliance. So you can see here where the DISC language, the DISC name comes from. It's an acronym for each of these different areas. And each of these represent a way of interacting with the problems, people, pace, and procedures in these different areas. So when you get a DISC score, which if you have just this work from home report, it's not going to give you the full DISC score, but it has calculated a profile for you, and based on that, it has given you suggestions. But those of you who have a previous DISC report, you know that that is is built on a combination of your scores in each of the 4 areas. So we don't just say, oh, I'm D, I'm I, I'm S, I'm C, but we say, I have a high score in this one, I have medium or low scores in the other areas. So you can see here on the screen, each of them has a varying degree of each one of these 4 areas, and it's that combination that makes each one of us unique. So those who have a high score on the D scale, that D stands for dominance, and people who have a strong D score tend to be fast-paced, task-oriented problem-solving people. They are looking for results. They're going to tackle problems and challenges head-on. They're going to be impatient with delays, and they're just going to want to grab the bull by the horns and get the ball rolling. You can, as we said, observe this. So if you have people in your family or in your workplace that are high Ds, you can watch for that in their body language. They tend to use a lot of hand motions. They tend to be fast going somewhere. They're forward leaning. These are aggressive, get the job done kinds of people. Those who have a high score on the I, on the yellow bar, tend to be influencing. They are also fast-paced, but they are more fast-paced in a people-oriented manner. They are looking for interaction. They love to talk with people. They love to be connected with the people in their world. They love to share their ideas and talk about what's going on in their lives. They love an environment with a high degree of people contact, so you can already see that working from home might be a challenge in some ways for these folks. They also will use lots of gestures and facial expressions. They're going to be less direct than the high Ds when they're walking. So you know that high D, focus, but high I, influence, interaction, very expressive. High S is for steadiness. These are slower paced, but also people-oriented. High S, they really love stability. They like to take one task at a time. They really love a predictable environment where you can take time for people. You can do tasks one at a time. If things are going to change, they like to happen in a slow, steady manner. And they're just going to be much more laid back and easygoing. Still people-oriented, still very generous people, but just a lot slower and more laid back in that interaction with people. And finally, our C stands for compliance. So again, they're going to be slower paced, but more task-oriented. They are looking for facts. So the high C is defined as how one responds to procedures and constraints. So a high C is going to thrive in an environment that needs critical thinking and analysis. They are your rule follower, analytical, very logical, precise quality control kinds of people. And they also are going to be very reserved, but in a different way from the high S because they are a task-oriented behavioral type. So, having kind of given an overview of what a strong D, I, S, and C would each look like, I'd like to emphasize that each one of these types is inherently good for certain tasks in certain situations. There's nothing to say that a D is better than a C, or an I or an S who are people-oriented are better than the Ds and Cs. Each one of these behavioral styles is good and is appropriate in a given situation. So whatever your report is on DISC, it is a good profile. We just have to learn how to appreciate and complement the strengths of other people, and we need to know when situations call for faster action, slower action, more people interaction, etc. So again, your DISC profile is a combination of your scores, both high and low. So again, if you look at these graphs here, you'll note like graph 2 has a very high score on the I, but the blue C score is very low. It's down at a 12. Both of those contribute to what a person's profile is going to look like. So it's not just your high scores, but also your low scores. So let's take a look for a minute at what having a low score in each of these categories might mean. So a low D is slow to anger. People with a low D score tend to be agreeable, cautious, and undemanding. They still are going to have to interact with problems and challenges in their environment, but they're going to do it in a much more methodical, slow, careful, calculating way. Whereas the high Ds are going to jump in and go full throttle. The low Ds are going to be much slower and thoughtful in the way they go about. So if you think you have someone with a low D in your environment, either your family or your workplace, you want to draw them into conversation and you want to present your reasons calmly to them. Those with a low I, whereas the high I is very chatty, engaging, enthusiastic, those with a low I are more reflective, factual, calculating, and matter of fact. They're going to sit and think about things, and usually what they say is going to be very incisive. So if you think you have a more reserved low I on your team, then interacting with them, you want to be logical and probably not too personal. The low S. High S is, the steady, stable. Low S is very expressive, impulsive, flexible, eager. They're going to be emotional. The lower that S score, the more that everything is an emergency. So with a low S, you want to express your feelings. You want to show openness because they're going to be very flexible and open themselves. Finally, the low C. Now, the high C is our analytic, logical rule follower. A person who is low C is independent, unsystematic, uninhibited, rather inattentive to detail, self-willed, and pioneering. Now, again, you can see some of these in certain circumstances might be bad. If you really need someone who's attentive to detail, you might not want someone who's a low C. But we need the independence and the pioneering attitude of the low Cs to help us problem solve. So in different situations, you might need someone with a high C, you might need someone with a low C. Both are strong, both are beneficial. It just depends on the situation. So tips for interacting with a low C: highlight new opportunities and challenge them, but sincerely. So if you are new to the DISC language, and if you're new and you also have a report that does not give you your individual scores or your graph, then you may be saying, well, I don't know. I don't know what my type is. I don't know if I'm an I or an S or a C. Or maybe you know what your type is, but you don't have reports for others on your team. So you're saying, how do I use the tips for communicating with others in my report? Well, the good news is that primary DISC behaviors are observable. So likely for you, as you've kind of heard this brief introduction, you have probably thought about some of your own tendencies. Yes, I tend to be more aggressive. No, I don't. Yes, I tend to be more compliant or analytical. No, I don't. So you're probably at least have a sense of what your primary type is. And then in observing others, for example, if you look at graph 2, the I score is all the way to the top at 100. So if you knew this person, then you would definitely be able to observe how enthusiastic, charismatic, very conversational that this person is, and probably also notice on the low side that the C, which is a 12, causes them to be very pioneering and also somewhat inattentive to details. On graph 3, this person has a very high S score above the 90, so they would very definitely appear as slow, methodical, just kind of unflappable, one task at a time, where the D score that is just a 4, you're going to notice, you're going to be able to observe that they are not an aggressive problem solver, but they tend to wait and kind of let problems unfold for themselves. On graph 1 and 4, those scores are not as high. The D score is about a 75. It's still going to be noticeable. The C score on graph 4 is still going to be noticeable. So these are observable. What is not as observable are the nuances, the scores that are in the middle. So this is why we do recommend that you get a full report. Knowing a primary style is useful. It's not the whole picture. So the full uniqueness, just the full value of the report comes out in seeing how all of these pieces blend together, and that's probably not as observable. But what you can do is get a sense of your own and your team's primary style through observing their behavior. So going back to the report, these tips that are specific to you are based on your specific combination of how high your C, D, I, and S scores are. And this page is going to look different for each person. Even two people who have a high I might have different tips because their other scores look a little bit different. So based on, whether you are very rule following, whether you need that interaction, there's going to be different tips for you on these pages. And then if you can think through the people on your team, wow, do they tend to be more aggressive? Do they tend to be more reflective? You can have tips for interacting with others. And those of you who have been through a DISC debriefing or a DISC workshop, you probably know the types of those on your team. And so you can think, oh, hey, when I'm interacting with teammates who are high D, they may not want a video conference. They may not want to have that interaction. They just need the bullet points. Whereas the folks on your team that are high I, every chance that you get to interact by video with them, that's going to be really useful. They're going to love that interaction. So I hope that just this brief walkthrough has been helpful to you in gaining just a foundational level understanding of what DISC language is and of seeing what this work from home report can offer to you and to your team. And if you've done DISC before, I hope it's been a good refresher just to remind you of what these letters stand for. We do want you to get the most out of these tools. And so if after having watched this, you say, hey, I would really like to know actually what my DISC scores are. If you just want more help in interpreting this and knowing how to use the information in the report, we'd love to talk to you. My contact information is here on the screen, and I look forward to hearing from you.